Assalamualaikum students. Today we are discussing the fetal membranes and the placenta. During the development of the conceptus, certain auxiliary structures are also formed which are concerned with the protection, nutrition and excretion and respiration of the embryo or the fetus. Most of these structures develop from the trophoblast, that is the outer cell mass. Now you remember the outer cell mass and are conventionally referred to as extraembryonic membranes or the fetal membranes. Although some of them are not membranous in the strict sense, eventually these membranes separate from the fetus partially or completely and then are discarded. The fundamental set of fetal membranes include the yolk sac, allantois, amnion, and chorion. And chorion, along with the maternal part, forms the placenta, which acts as organ of exchange between the fetus and the mother. During the second week of development, the conceptus in the blastocyst stage, you can see here, this is the blastocyst stage, and this is also known as the conceptus, implants itself into the uterine endometrium. So this is the uterine endometrium, this is the uterine epithelium, and this is the uterine endometrium, and blastocyst is implanting itself into the endometrium. As the blastocyst penetrates, it, it stimulates a response in the endometrium which is called the decidual reaction, also known as decidua reaction. During the decidual reaction, here you can see the endometrial stroma and the implanting embryo. It, it stimulates the endometrium and it initiates a reaction which is known as decidual reaction. Now, during this decidual reaction, the stromal cells of the endometrium enlarge and they become polygonal in shape, and their cytoplasm becomes laden with lipid droplets and glycogen granules. The cells, these cells are known as decidual cells. The endometrial stroma becomes more highly vascularized and endometrium. You can see here it is more highly vascularized and edematous. The endometrium of the pregnant uterus is now referred to as the decidua. Now, this is the endometrium in which the blastocyst is implanted, and now this endometrium is known as decidua. The decidual cells serve the following functions. The lipid and glycogen stored in the cytoplasm of these cells serve as nutrients for the early embryo, and the stromal cells provide an immunologically safe environment for the embryo and appear to prevent the maternal recognition of the embryo as a foreign body. Beginning of the second month of gestation, the embryonic side of the growing embryo. Now, this is the embryonic side of the growing embryo, and this side begins to bulge into the uterine cavity. There three regions of the decidua now can be identified according to their relation to the conceptus. Decidua basalis, Decidua capsularis, and Decidua praetalis. Okay, here Decidua basalis, Decidua capsularis, and decidua praetalis. So three components can be seen here of the decidua. Now one by one we will look what these components are. Decidua basalis, this is the part of the decidua which underlies the embryonic pole of the conceptus. So decidua basalis underlies the embryonic pole. This is the embryonic pole, and this is the part of the endometrium of the uterus which is overlying the embryonic pole of the embryo. This part of decidua participates in the formation of the maternal part of the placenta. Now, decidua basalis, it participates in the formation of maternal part of the placenta. Then the decidua capsularis. The abembryonic side of the conceptus is also covered by a thin capsule of endometrial tissue. Here you can see, because the embryo is properly embedded in the uterine cavity, this whole conceptus is properly embedded, and there is a thin tissue surrounding the abembryonic pole. Now this tissue is known as decidua capsularis. This part of the endometrium of the uterus is known as decidua capsularis. This part of the decidua, it separates the chorionic sac from the uterine cavity. Now this hole is the chorionic sac. This is the chorionic sac, and this separates the chorionic sac, and this separates the chorionic sac with the uterine cavity. Now the decidua parietalis. This part of the decidua lines the remaining area of the uterine wall and is not in direct relation to the conceptus. Now the rest of the endometrium of the uterus, which is not in direct contact with the developing embryo, this is known as decidua parietalis. So decidua, it is the decidua is the endometrium of the uterus, and it has got three parts: decidua basalis, which takes part in formation of placenta, the maternal part of placenta. Then the decidua capsularis, which is surrounding the abembryonic pole of the embryo, and decidua parietalis is the rest of the decidua parietalis is rest of uh, the endometrium, which is lining the cavity of the uterine cavity. As the fetus grows and the chorionic sac expands in size, the decidua capsularis is gradually stretched. You can see here, as the embryo it grows, the decidua capsularis is stretched, the amniotic cavity, this chorionic cavity increases in size, and the chorionic, this is the chorionic cavity, it increases, and the decidua capsularis is gradually stretched. As the fetus enlarges in size, it obliterates the uterine cavity. Here you can see, this is the uterine cavity remaining. Rest of the uterine cavity is obliterated. As the fetus enlarges in size, and by the end of third month of development, the decidua capsularis come in contact with the decidua parietalis. Here you can see, at the end of third month, the decidua parietalis comes in contact with the decidua capsularis due to enlargement of the fetus. Due to the steady enlargement of the fetus, the blood vessels of the decidua, constantly stretching decidua capsularis becomes compressed. So blood vessels in this decidua, they become compressed. The reduction in blood supply causes the decidua capsularis to degenerate, and by the 24th week, the decidua capsularis disintegrates and disappears almost entirely. Consequently, the smooth part of the chorion comes in direct contact with the decidua parietalis. The yolk sac. The ova of certain lower species of animals, for example, reptiles and birds, they contain a very large quantity of yolk, which is a nutritive material rich in fatty and albuminous substances. Embryos of such animal develop an extra embryonic yolk sac to enclose the massive yolk. Vitally in blood vessels, are formed on the surface of the yolk sac through which the absorbed yolk substances is conveyed to the embryo for its further development. As the amount of yolk decreases, the yolk gradually dwindles. Just before hatching occurs, the yolk sac slips through the navel into the abdominal cavity of the chick and the body wall closes behind it. Now, the ova of the mammals, including the human, contain a very small amount of yolk because their embryos are seen sheltered and nourished within the uterine wall of the mother. However, the embryo of these animals do develop an extraembryonic membranous sac, which is analogous to the yolk sac of the reptiles and birds. Early development of yolk sac. Now, this so-called yolk sac of the human embryo, it do not store any yolk within it, and therefore it is to be regarded as vestigial structure. Nevertheless, the yolk sac, also known as umbilical vesicle of the human embryo, is not entirely a functionless structure, but it is useful for the embryo in the following three ways. Now, during second and third week of development, the yolk sac serves as a medium for transfer of nutrients from the chorion to the embryo. And during the third and fourth week of development, the primordial germ cells originate in the wall of the yolk sac. And during the folding of the embryonic disc, the dorsal part of the yolk sac here, it is incorporated into the embryo to form the primitive gut. Now, what is the fate of yolk sac in human? After the completion of embryonic folding, the yolk sac of the umbilical vesicle is connected to the primitive gut by short yolk stalk known as vitelline duct. The yolk sac gradually diminishes in size and the diameter of yolk stalk steadily decreases. Finally, the yolk stalk becomes solid and disintegrates and disappears by the 12th week of development. Normally, the yolk sac also disappears completely, but sometimes it may found in the umbilical cord near the fetal surface of the placenta as a small solid structure which is referred to as yolk sac remnant. Okay, so allantois in human embryo, the allantois is a blind tubular endodermal diverticulum. Here you can see this is endodermal diverticulum, blind tubular endodermal diverticulum, which grows from the posterior part of the yolk sac into the mesoderm of the connecting stalk during the third week of development. It grows in the mesoderm of the connecting stalk in third week of the development. This is the diverticulum of the yolk sac lined by endoderm. Now, in embryos of the reptiles and birds, the allantois develop into large amniotic sac, which is connected to the hindgut by a narrow allantoic stalk. The allantoic sac expands and spreads throughout the extraembryonic coelom. Finally, it fuses with the chorion to produce a common membrane that underlies the entire eggshell. In this location, allantois serves as a respiratory organ of the embryo through which oxygen is taken up and carbon dioxide is given off. The allantoic cavity of these embryo also act as a reservoir for the excretory waste products. Now, in embryo of the lower mammals, that is the carnivorous, they also produce a prominent allantois. But in these animals, the respiratory function is performed by the placenta, but the waste products are not excreted through the placenta. Rather, it is stored in the large allantois of these embryos. Now, in humans, the allantois is a vestigial structure. In these embryos, it remains small and does not have any functional importance, as described earlier. The allantois of the human embryo is now it's as a result of formation of the tail fold, the posterior part of the yolk sac becomes incorporated into the caudal part of the embryo as hindgut, and then the allantois appears to be diverticulum from the cloaca, which is the terminal part of the hindgut. when it becomes incorporated, now this is the diverticulum of the terminal part of the hindgut. This appears to be as diverticulum of the terminal part of hindgut, and from cloaca the allantois passes into the connecting stalk, which give rise to the umbilical cord. In second month of development, the allantois undergoes obliteration and disappears completely. Now, in human embryo, the allantois is vestigial structure. It neither performs any function during the embryonic life nor leaves any remnant. However, the only significance of this structure concerns the allantoic blood vessels. You can see here the blood vessels which are arising in the mesoderm surrounding this allantois, extraembryonic mesoderm surrounding the allantois, and continues on to the chorion to become connected to the chorionic blood vessels. The allantoic blood vessels do not disappear with the obliteration of allantois, but persist as umbilical blood vessels, a pair of umbilical arteries and a single umbilical vein that serves to connect the chorionic blood vessels of the placenta. It is a embryonic circulatory system. It connects the embryonic circulatory system with the circulation of the placenta. So you can see here the blood vessels developing in the allantois. They serve as a connection between the embryonic circulation and the chorionic blood vessels of the placenta. So this is the significance of the allantois. Amnion, it is a membrane that encloses the amniotic cavity. Regarding its formation, it is formed at the 8th day of development as a small cavity in the epiblast cells with the formation of amnioblasts. So the floor of the cavity is the epiblast while the roof is formed by the amnioblast. Now by the 12th day, it becomes separated from the cytotrophoblast by the primary mesoderm, that is the extraembryonic mesoderm. Now, amnioectodermal junction is at the margin of the oval embryonic disc at the third week. Now, during the fourth week, expansion of the amniotic cavity leads to folding of the embryonic disc, and amnioectodermal junction will be present at the primitive umbilical ring. I will show you in the diagram. At the third month, the amnion, it comes in contact with the chorion to form the chorionic, amniochorionic membrane with obliteration of the chorionic cavity. By the end of third month, the uterine cavity is obliterated due to expansion of the amniotic cavity, and finally the amniotic cavity surrounds the fetus and it forms a tubular sheath around the umbilical cord. The second week of development, and you can see here bilamellar germ disc, that is the epiblast and hypoblast. These are the amnioblast cells appearing between the trophoblast and the epiblast. So its roof is formed by the so this is the amniotic cavity which is appearing, and the roof is formed by the amnioblast and floor is formed by the epiblast cells. Here you can see the amniotic cavity proper. It is growing in size, and now here you can see the amniotic cavity and it is surrounded by the mesoderm, extra embryonic mesoderm. So the epiblast cells and the it's forming its floor, and the amnioblast are surrounded by the extra embryonic mesoderm. Now, in the early development, the amnion is attached to the margins of the embryonic disc where it joins the surface ectoderm. Here you can see shown in the blue one. So it is joining, amnion is joining at the margin of the surface ectoderm. At the completion of the embryonic folding, the amnion continues to surround the embryo, which now appears to bulge into the amniotic cavity. So here folding is occurring. You can see here and due to folding the amniotic cavity, it begins to surround the developing embryo. Now it has surrounded the developing embryo, and the embryo it appears to bulge into the amniotic cavity. All the subsequent embryonic and fetal development occurs within the amniotic sac in which the embryo or fetus lie immersed in the embryonic this amniotic fluid. Now this embryonic fold brings the amnioectodermal junction onto the ventral surface of the cylindrical embryo. Here you can see the this amnioectodermal junction. It lies ventrally to the ventral side of the embryo. Finally, this junction comes to lie on the ventral abdominal wall of the embryo at the umbilical ring. So this is the umbilical ring, and which surrounds the proximal attachment of the connecting stalk and the root of vitelline duct. Now, as the embryo grows, the amniotic cavity gradually expands in size. This is the amniotic cavity, and it gradually expands in size. And this size of the amniotic cavity occurs at the expense of the chorionic cavity. So here, this is the amniotic cavity. It grows in size, and as a result, the amniotic cavity, the chorionic cavity, it reduces. Eventually, the amnion comes in contact with the chorion. So the amnion, this is the amnion, amniotic membrane, and it comes to lie with the chorionic membrane. And these two membranes fuse with each other by the end of 8th week of development to form the amniochorionic membrane. So they fuse with each other, and the amniotic cavity is obliterated. Expansion of the amniotic cavity forces the vitelline duct and yolk sac to merge with the connecting stalk, which is elongating and transforming into the umbilical cord. Here you can see umbilical cord, and due to the steady expansion of the amniotic cavity, the outer surface of the umbilical cord becomes completely covered by the amnion. So the outermost covering of the mature umbilical cord is formed by the amnion.